Good evening, welcome to MMA Newsround. My name's Aaron Chatfield. With me this evening, Darren Sherlock and Mr. Beverly Hills himself, Ian M16 Butling. And this is the first in a series of programmes focusing on UK MMA, looking back at some of the exciting fights we've seen and looking forward to some of the fights that are coming up on the diary. Let me introduce to you my co-presenters this evening. On my left, Ian Butling. Ian, how are you this evening?
Very well, thank you, Aaron.
Good. What have you been up to recently?
Just been doing bits of bats, commentating with my MMA consultancy company, promotion through Ultimate Cage Championships, just get myself around as much as I can.
Good stuff. Little bird told me that you might be making a comeback.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be coming back and fighting again June this year.
Good. What weight?
Knew you'd ask that. I'm going to be coming back at welterweight.
Welterweight.
Yeah.
You were a featherweight though, weren't you?
I was a featherweight and now I'm probably a heavyweight.
So, well, you think you'll make welterweight at some point this year?
I think that's a nice middle ground, 77, you know.
Well, I'll be looking forward to you making a comeback as well.
Are you looking forward to making weight or the comeback?
Both, I think. I think both will be very entertaining. So. And also with me on my right, the promoter for Fight Icon itself, Darren Sherlock. Good evening, Darren. How are you?
Hi, Aaron. Great, thank you. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
What have you been up to?
Keeping busy as usual, running the gym, promoting, also getting involved with the TV thing now, the MMA Newsround. Yeah, we've got a lot of big things happening with Icon this year.
Excellent stuff. And this evening we're going to be looking at a few shows up and down the country, but specifically focusing on Fight Icon. Now, Darren, you're our expert on promotions and our expert on all the rules, etc. Give the viewers a little bit of an overview of what we can expect from amateur and professional rules this evening.
Yeah, obviously I've worked very, very closely with developing the rule sets that we currently use now. The UK MMA community can't seem to agree on rule sets amongst themselves. So
well, I'm right, everybody else is wrong. It's exactly the right way to think of it.
It's confusing for the guys involved in it, so obviously for the fan at home, you know, it's important that we do kind of explain the way things are going. In the past we've had sort of semi-pro rules and all the sort of grey areas on rule sets. One thing I developed within the amateur rules, working closely with the ISKA, was the different classifications that we're using now. We're using the C class, which are no headshots whatsoever.
Yeah.
More for junior fighters and for their safety. We've got the B class, which used to be known as semi-pro, where fighters can hit to the head but not on the floor. And then obviously we've got the amateur rules, which are getting a bit more prolifically used amongst shows up and down the country now. A lot of people would argue that that is real MMA, where the ground and pound is involved. And they're similar to what you'd see on the Nevada State Athletic Commission rules over from America.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing is, we were fighting 2002, 2003, and everyone just jumped in and fought a pro.
There was no amateur rules.
But now we're complaining there's too many rule sets. You know, then there wasn't. A few different ones come in, and I think the problem was different promotions brought in different sets of rules, thinking that we did need something else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think we would have been better following the American style in the first place and just having the two separate, and I think that's what we're coming back to right now.
I'd agree, and I think from a fan's perspective, you know, people want to see that rule set. Unfortunately, we have got this mess, and what I've just tried to do is sort of classify them so that people can understand and sing to the same hymn sheet, basically. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, to me, MMA is punching people on the ground. As soon as you remove that, I don't think it's MMA anymore. I think you're starting to get into a whole different sport. I'm not bothered what people do at an inter-club level, what they do in their own club, but I think as a sport, you know, just like you see in boxing, they should look the same at the amateur and the pro level, and it's the level of the fighter that should be different.
And for me, that's right for the people back at home. You know, they can really get to understand what MMA is all about, because the amount of shows that I've been to and commentated on where they can't understand, you know, they're shouting, hit him in the head. Well, sorry mate, but they can't, not in these rules, you know. Yeah. And I think it'll just give that better understanding and a better appreciation for the people at home, just having that rule set.
Exactly. So let's get on with some action. Our first bout this evening is all the way from Fight Icon, back in the end of 2011. It's an amateur C-class bout between Adam Meskel and Nick Heppel. Let's have a look at this bout. Let's see what we see.
What was it? Always get with these C-class, no headshots yet?
Yeah, I did. You know, we've had that discussion already. I find it very frustrating, especially when you've got a bout like this where both the guys are coming out to stand up. You know, you would think that instantly you would go, right, I want to stand up and fight with somebody.
Yeah.
I might as well hit him in the face rather than just hit him in the body. But both of these guys, you know, throwing ample shots, kicks and punches.
I don't want to say too much about this, and it'll probably get cut out, but I'd rather watch a dead arm competition than C-class rules MMA, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you, going forward in the future, we're going to have very, very, well, probably...
I mean, and this is absolutely standard for C-class MMA. The amount of C-class MMA fights that I've seen having to get stopped numerous times for groin shots is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, you've got two amateurs firing knees in at each other because they can get that closer distance because they can't hit each other in the head.
Yeah.
So they end up hitting each other in the you know.
Nice. I don't know whether you can use that term on the TV, but anyway. But let's carry on.
In the good.
And what we're definitely not going to do is just come up with as many different ways of saying.
In the meat and two ways. So we're going to have to.
Crackers.
The thing with this, with these C classes, we are going to be a little bit kind of like, you know, these are two very skilled fighters. They're not really getting the ability to show their true potential because of the rule set, in my opinion. And I think if those rule sets are taken out, which is I know you're looking at doing, Daz, you then have a more of a position where the fighters can fight, you know, something like that, rather than being negative about, because we can be negative about it all day long, and and I would rather watch a dead arm competition. Yeah, but I think she was just trying to be a bit more positive. I mean, because that just automatically came out because
those guys are going to be sat watching it thinking, I got in there.
I give it everything, you know.
Yeah.
And these guys are, you know, they're doing what they can. To me, neither of them are showing their true potential because they can't hit each other in the head.
I do think that, you know, that's part of MMA, the ability to blend all of that together, to say, you know, okay, this fight is about trying to beat my opponent using submissions, strikes, wrestling, positions, all of that together. Yeah. What you get with Amateur C is you get a kickboxing contest on the feet, with body shots, and then on the ground you just get a Jiu-Jitsu competition.
Certainly, and I think the other thing is, I mean, a lot of the argument for C-class rules is it helps you develop and prepare and get ready for the other rules. Well, it doesn't, because you get people getting bad habits where they're dropping their hands down. You know,
you can see this straight away.
You know, they're walking along with their hands down. For me, both these fighters would be better getting in, fighting, you know, the B-class amateur rules, which has got the headshot standing but not on the floor, so they're never going to get ground and pounded, you know, if that's the worry. But you get the right distancing, the right stance and everything for MMA.
No, as a promoter, I completely agree, and as a coach as well. My own fighters, I personally don't like them doing C-class because we have a good stand-up background. And I think there's two types of people who it would suit, and that is pure grapplers who don't know how to throw headshot punches, and also younger fighters. Now, for the younger fighters, maybe on a tournament, in a sports show, not in a cage, I think it's a very good route, because obviously we don't want under 16s doing headshots.
Yeah, and then we go with another groin shot, which again, it's a side effect of the rules.
So I agree with what you're saying about juniors. So, you know, juniors, into clubs, all those things. I'm not really that worried yet. Have those rules. I disagree with what you're saying about grapplers, because the problem I find is that, you know, grapplers will go, do you know what? I'm really good with my jiu-jitsu, but I'm not that confident about striking. They go out and they have 3 or 4 amateur fights and then suddenly leap up to pro, and all of a sudden they're getting full-blown punches to the head with 4-ounce gloves on. They haven't prepared for that.
To be honest, to be honest, I have had, and it's been a bit infuriating, certain jiu-jitsu clubs that have only wanted to stay at sea and never advance further than that. And for me,
that's not MMA.
And you know, jiu-jitsu. For me, they've got one plan, and that is to go in and do contests against people who aren't as good at grappling. You know, if you just want to do grappling against other good grapplers. Don't come in and think I can fight an MMA guy and I'll be able to win. If you just want a good record, go buy yourself one.
Yeah, you could. The thing is, you can see that those fighters quite often will choose a guy from a pure stand-up background.
Yeah,
you know, and they'll go, "I'll fight you at amateur C class, so you can't punch him in the head and use all your tied skills, but I will be able to take you down to the ground and submit you."
And I'm going to come out on my bum.
Yeah, well, you know what? And we've seen it. We've genuinely seen fighters that have come out from a grappling background. And they shall remain nameless for the sake of embarrassment, but have actually come out and literally sat down so that they couldn't be punched on the ground and shuffled their way towards an opponent. Seriously, is that what we want to see from MMA?
Well, fortunately, this is the only one that we had on this event, and it'll probably be the last to going forward.
No, so, you know, and we're all developing as we go, and the same with Fight Icon. Yeah. You know, your first few shows you might have had more of the C, and it's just sort of got phased out, and it's got to a point now where you think, yeah, do you know what, people don't really want to watch that, and it's probably not as good for the fighters, you know, and that just shows the development of Fight Icon as it's gone along.
But what we're seeing here, we've got Meskel and Heppel. They're putting on a pretty good bout within the rules that they've decided to fight. I mean, but clearly both of these guys are very game fighters. They have some stand-up skills. When it's gone to the ground, they've shown that they've got some skills as well, because I know that Sean's a good coach. And I'm pretty sure as well that Sean would like his fighters fighting at the sort of full amateur A-class rules as well. So I think, you know, we're going to see less and less of these kind of rules taking place. There are more and more shows that are leading the way, more and more promoters that are saying, I'm only going to do amateur and pro. And also more and more clubs. You mentioned that your club, Salford MMA, you put guys forwards for these sort of rules. Team Coliseum, where I coach, we do exactly the same thing. We do not fight semi-pro. We basically fight, you know, unified rules style, amateur and professional. And I know that also with M16 MMA as well, it's the same.
We've all moved forward, haven't we, in the same way, really, and through the experience we've gained over the past few years, you know, we've all had fighters at semi-pro rules.
Exactly.
The way we spar in the gym is generally the unified amateur rules. You know, we're pretty much fighting pro rules, but with bigger gloves, no elbows, and we don't pull on the twisting leg locks, which is pretty much like the amateur rules, and that's how the pros and the amateurs all train together.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're going to do every episode is we're going to discuss one of the hot topics, and this week, inspired by Frank Maloney and his Twitter escapades, we're going to focus on women's MMA. So Ian, you were engaged with Frank on this particular topic. What happened?
Well, yeah, obviously Frank sort of came on basically saying he doesn't think that women should, and basically Jane Couch, MBE, shouldn't be showing any other capacity than a fan buying a ticket. You know, I thought that was a little bit harsh. You know, she's earned the right.
Sounds reasonable to me.
I know. So I sort of commented, well, maybe she would fight you for a ticket, Frank. And then we had a little bit of discussion there, and obviously sort of mentioning what I said to him. Look, what do you think about women in MMA? Now I commented on a lot of fights last year, and the two that stood out for me at the end of the year was Rosie Sexton's win on Cage Warriors and Ashlyn Daly's win on Cage Warriors.
Yeah.
Two of the probably highest skilled fights that I watched all year. You know, out of hundreds of fights I commentated on, and then I mean that leads nicely to the fact that the two of them are fighting each other this year. So you know, for Frank to say that, I think it's just you know, maybe not so much in boxing where you've got such a deep talent pool of men, but in the female sport, and because it's such a young sport and the female have started at a similar time to the men, I think in our sport in MMA, the women are just as high a level in skill as the men.
Coming up to the next fight on Icon, Helen Coppers versus Cheryl Flynn. One of the only female bout that we had on the event. It was for me one of the fights of the night. It was an amazing fight. The girls fought their heart out for 3 rounds with a submission within about the last 5 seconds of the last round. It was really
I've worked with Cheryl over at Neil Hall's gym. She's Neil's fighter, and she's got very, very good boxing. You know, out of a lot of the female fighters that I've worked with and trained with, she's got probably one of the best boxing.
I have seen her fight. I mean, I'm not going to agree with Frank Maloney, but I'm not going to agree with anybody with what you're saying either. This is my main issue, and it's not an issue with the skill level in female MMA. My main issue is because the talent pool is a lot smaller than the male version of the sport. So, you know, whereas in a male version of sport there's several hundred fighters out there, so therefore when you take off the top 10%, you can go, right, the quality's there. When you reduce that to, you know, a fifth of the size and take the top 10%, what you end up with is 4, 5, maybe 6 fighters in the whole of the country that are actually at a level that you go, you know what, that shows MMA, regardless of the sex of the fighter, that shows MMA at its best. So what you end up with, in the UK, name me 10 top female fighters.
Well,
no, don't change the topic. Don't change the topic. I agree. That's my problem.
Firstly, can I counter that argument, Aaron, in saying that I've watched numerous fights over the last 12 months, and I could probably say that only 10% of the males fighting professionally should actually be fighting professionally.
I agree, but that's still a big number than there is in the female. And now, don't get me wrong, I agree with what you're saying. What we need is more female fighters, not
Sexton.
less.
Ashland Daly.
2.
Diane Berry.
Right. See what I mean? You're starting to run out already. Diane hasn't fought for what? 4 or 5 years, something like.
Very good striking.
4 or 5 years. So that, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. We need more women fighting in that sport. It's important if you want to see the standard and the quality and the depth of talent.
Emma
You need
Watson.
more fighters. You need more fighters. You need more fighters in there. And I think that when you see good female fighters, you know, when you see Rosie Sexton fight, I don't want to fight her. Do you know? I reckon I stand an okay chance to just swing a big hammer. You know, seriously, very, very skilled fighter, regardless of the sex. When you see those top quality fighters, it's very, very obvious to me that women have a place in this sport. We've got to work out a way that we get more women involved in this sport so that we can get a higher number of quality fighters in there.
Yeah.
But Frank Maloney is wrong. Okay, so our next bout from Fight Icon is an amateur B-class competition. So this is headshot standing. And we're going to see 2 fighters here, Talbot versus Naz.
Both these guys making the debut, so you know there's going to be a lot of nerves about. We often see with debut fighters, you know, the amount of times we've commentated around, and the debut fighters are often quite frantic for the first 30 seconds, just trying to get those nerves out. You know, the adrenaline. You obviously remember your first fight, Aaron, a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I mean, my first MMA fight was, you know, early 2000s, and yeah, indeed, you know, typically what you see in a debut fight is that you start swinging for the fences relatively quickly, and you give up all the skills that you've practiced for so long, and got into your mind, and you're ready to go, and you throw it all out the window and start trying to take somebody's head off. You know, it's, typically, I went in throwing big shots and looking for heads. So that's where you go. So this is a very interesting fight. This, Darren, can you remember which guy wins on this?
Yeah, Joe Naz, I believe. I think it was it was an armbar or a triangle.
So off memory, Ian, can you remember what it was?
My memory's not very good.
Okay,
So
I think it was a triangle finish. So. You know, but at least this is starting to get closer to what you would recognise as MMA. You got headshots on the ground, headshots standing rather, and then on the ground no headshots. But you know, straight away you didn't see any shots thrown standing.
I think that there was a big mistake made there, which again is something that's quite commonly seen. Going for a sacrifice throw and not fully committing. If you're going to do a sacrifice throw, you need to fully commit, or you're ending up underneath.
Clues in the name.
Yeah,
You know, genuinely. If you're going
sacrifice.
for any form of sacrifice throw, the clue is in the name. You need to sacrifice position. You've got to go for it wholeheartedly, because genuinely, if you don't do that, you inevitably end up underneath. And indeed, what's happened is, yeah,
He's defending well. He seems to have his hand on that side of his head. I think it's difficult to see from this angle, but I think he has got his hand on the right side of his head and he's defending it fairly well.
he is, but actually, you know, there's some mistakes made in the way that submission has been applied. It's a little too parallel with his opponent. He needs to turn himself out. He needs to get up on his toes and push his weight in.
I'd actually switched through my right leg, so I'm switching my base to
So
get
you
more
base
pressure.
switch?
Yeah.
So both, even you and I both disagree on how we would
Finish the submission.
Because I would turn out more to a 90 degrees angle. I would get on my toes and I would push in to do that. But again, the thing with this submission, and virtually any sort of strangle choke submission, is it's all about applying that pressure slowly and consistently.
So,
and what you find quite often again with amateurs is that they'll put this submission on and
Squeeze.
squeeze it. It hasn't worked, I'll let it go, I'll find it, squeeze it.
I've even seen coaches shouting squeeze.
Yeah,
Squeeze it.
I think you've really got to take your time with any sort of strangle or choke.
Position is the most important thing. You know, you don't need the strength if you've got the correct position. I'd have personally gone with the instinct of switching through and putting a bit more crank in.
There you go.
Hanging up on you, Evan.
Yeah, I've been around longer than you. So here we go. So this is close to the finish now, and I believe that it was a triangle choke finish.
Yeah.
So superb. Really good performance. That was Naz, was it, that won that?
Yeah, that's true.
Really good performance for Naz. I think he dominated virtually all the way through that fight, apart from, you know, he had to capitalise on that failed takedown initially, but after that point, it was all him on the ground.
Yeah, certainly.
Excellent. So there you go. Superb triangle finish win for Naz. Okay, and our next bout from Fight Icon, it's another amateur B-class bout, so strike standing to the head, no headshots on the ground, and this is Husty versus Tierney. Tell me a little bit about these guys.
Yeah, Husty, very good fighter out of Sakata. He'd already had one win coming into this, so fairly new, but seems quite explosive. Tierney, another lad out of East Lancs Predators.
Okay, so Sakata MMA, first thing that springs to my mind whenever I hear about anybody coming from Sakata is that they are going to be, superb at Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah, they're going to have the skills on the ground. East Lancs Predators, immediately when I think about those guys, they're tough guys. Yeah. I know that's how they train. They're proper, savages. They can really fight. And that makes for quite an interesting mix, because I guess what you've got here is Husty trying to get this to the ground to get his jiu-jitsu, and he has done.
It's exactly how I'd expect it. He's got the takedown, he's into half guard. I expect him to pass and try and dominate the groundwork. But like you said, these East Lancs guys are very tough and hard to finish.
Yep. I think Wayne's got a little bit of boxing background as well. I know that he's quite good with his hands, the fights that I've seen. A little bit of a mixed record, but I expect that he would have preferred to keep this fight standing rather than where he is now, which is on top, unable to punch his opponent in the face.
Exactly, his boxing's not doing any good there. But look at that, and again, nice the conditioning and the powerful explosive turn.
But obviously caught in a triangle.
This is always the risk,
Yeah. And it looks as though it's on there. It does look tight.
Yeah, I think that's over.
He's doing the right thing to defend it.
He needs to pull down the head.
And a beautiful finish. So there you go. So just to ruin everything that we've just said completely, the guy with the ground skills has just lost to the guy with the boxing skills by a submission on the ground.
Well, as you know, anything can happen in MMA.
So we're now going to look at some highlights from some of the other bouts on Fight Icon 9. And the first one up is Des Parker from Sakata MMA facing off against Mark Ryder from Apex MMA.
And it was a great fight at the end there. Fantastic finish from Des Parker with a reverse triangle. He was looking at his coach Gary Savage for a bit of advice there, and just tightened it up slightly and got the win. Fantastic win.
Our next set of highlights come from the professional rules bouts. And first we're going to see Alex Minogue from the infamous Wolfslayer Academy facing off against Joe Deeney from Immortal MMA.
And what a great fight that was. Deeney getting opened up with a cut there early in the first round, and Minogue, tough and durable as ever, went on to finish with a rear naked choke.
Yeah, I think he's really developed that sort of mauling style and used it to his advantage.
Yeah.
The highlight of the bout between Rob Freeman from East Lancs Predators. He takes on one of the country's toughest fighters, regularly fighting every week, a gentleman that we all know very well, Danny Welsh.
Yeah, Danny's a great kickboxing background. It was a classic Danny Welsh fight, to be honest. He was taken down quite quickly, submitted with a rear naked choke, but to give him his dues, he did defend for quite some time.
And the main event of Fight Icon 9 was for the ISK English title, where we saw challenger Gavin Sterrett from the infamous Wolfslayer Academy taking on the undefeated champion Avi Jack from Predators.
Great initial straight shots there from Avi Jack.
Well, Avi Jack, was this coming off the KO over Andy Devent?
That's right, yeah.
So he's got some confidence in his power. He knows he's got the power to stop people.
And you see all Sterrett shots there coming around the outside. Avi was successful down the middle, but Sterrett comes in with some nice
Sterrett's got the guillotine or the gavatine or whatever he calls it these days.
Yeah, straight into that position. As soon as Avi got caught with those shots and went for the takedown.
Switch sides.
Yep, switched to the opposite side.
I don't think Avi doesn't appear to be defending it though. That's what
worries me.
Like
he's out.
And he's out. He is out.
He was
absolutely out. Immediately, instead of looking for a suitable defence for that, he just seemed to keep driving for the takedown. I don't think he sensed the danger.
No, I don't think so. I mean, he swapped it from sides. He should have initially got his arm straight on that. There was
pull it down, lift your arm up, get something to take the pressure off that. Instead, he kept driving for the takedown. And I think that cost him the fight.
The Predators' corner are usually such a good vocal team.
Yeah.
It surprises me that they weren't giving him the correct instructions, or whether maybe in the guillotine he couldn't hear what was coming from his corner.
So, good performance by Gav Sterrett, and I'm sure that his coach Tom Blackledge was exceedingly pleased with that performance. So there you go. That's the end of our first episode of Newsround, MMA Newsround, and we're going to be back very shortly with another episode where we can talk about some of the other exciting shows that we've seen. if you want to get involved with the programme, if you've got products that we want to review or topics that you want us to discuss, then by all means get in contact with us at Sherlock Promotions.
Yeah, we're filming events up and down the UK now. If you're interested in having film footage done that we can use on the show, we're looking at connecting MMA across the UK and highlighting as many of the UK's talent that we can.
And if you're interested in being a ring girl, you can send your pictures to ianbutlin.com.
And with that, we're done. Good night.